maybe one or two quick notes about this is, this piece of property came to the city some months ago. There was a decision made between the city administrator and myself as far as everybody has talked about more public access, beach access, lake access, wanting more of it. So we could have ignored it. We didn't. We brought it to the council, and now we are putting it in front of the council again to see if we want to move forward with a purchase sale agreement. It doesn't bind us to anything except explore and hear from the public. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our city administrator, Mike Jackson. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome everyone. So this is part of a larger project that the city council has approved to take a look at all potential access properties in the city. Many of them are already owned by the city. This happens to be a parcel that's available for purchase, and this is an older photo. You can see Spader Bay across the way. I've got the same photo a little later, and this is pre-lookout days, and so that's why you don't see any development there. But this is basically the open hillside. It's fairly rugged. We see it potentially as a viewscape, an open viewscape, so when you look from the city, you're able to view an undeveloped area, or when you look from this site itself, you're able to look out over the lake. So we all know the Lake Chelan is central to why people live in the community. I mean, it is the main appeal for the community. Most residents live fairly close to a lake shore, but not directly on the lake. We know that there's an opportunity to create enhanced community access, like I said, through properties that the city may already own, but hasn't developed or made available to the public, and then some future potential acquisitions. So in this process that we're working through right now with Jim Brennan and Associates, and he spent the last couple of days out here inventorying all of the potential sites. We'll inventory all sites, including the Spader Bay, and then we'll have a public workshop and meeting, and we'll select 8 of those sites for future concept plans that Brennan will work on. 8 sites plus Spader Bay, if Spader Bay is approved. And I think we've identified around 18 sites, potential sites today. So we're going to have to thin those out a little bit. The primary project goals are to inventory all the water access sites, so all of the potential sites in the community. And when citizens come to the public meeting, if you identify sites that we haven't identified, then of course we'll add those. So we've utilized our city staff and Mr. Brennan and the county resources to try and identify all the potential access sites. So our intent is to improve the utilization of public land for all people. We want to consider potential new access sites, and currently it's this one site that's been identified because it is available for sale. We want to increase the diversity of recreational activities, provide good stewardship to public lands. It's been very interesting as we look back over time. In 1927, these properties were identified, and then in 2016, the city did a shoreline study, Craig, 2006, I guess it was, Craig, and the sites were identified. And so we're hoping at least this time, and this will be all part of the public process, but that we identify these sites as being available to the public through signage and through some kind of a wayfinding program as you're going down the road, and it says public access. Now, some of these aren't much more than a way to access the shore and a view of the lake, but that's very important as access to the shoreline becomes more and more scarce. And we will weigh the impacts of the current use of the site. Some of these sites might be overgrown with shrubbery, but honestly, some of them have some fairly significant development on them, and that's something that the council and the public and the city will have to consider as we move forward, because basically over time they've been utilized possibly for other purposes. But we'll also look at the surrounding property. We want to make it ADA accessible wherever possible. We want to enhance the views from land to lake and from lake to land, because many of us, much of the time, you can only get out once or twice a month to actually hike, but sometimes every day you drive past an open viewscape that you can enjoy. We want to improve community walkability, and we want to enhance the visibility, as I mentioned, of this access through a wayfinding program. And I'm sure there'll be other goals that are developed as we invite the public and discuss these. So the access study area, covers the city boundaries. You can see those there, and of course it's all along the shoreline. So it's confined to the city of Chelan. So the type of programming potentially we're looking at is viewing, like we said, view sheds, swimming, wading, picnicking, fishing, playing, socializing. So they're active uses, but they're somewhat passive, so not necessarily playgrounds or picnic shelters or that kind of thing. In terms of facilities, potentially hand-carry boat launch, some kind of floating pier, could have picnic tables or benches, artwork, and signage. So the criteria as we work through this with the public will be to look for the areas that are the highest benefit to the community. Land that is already owned by the city or currently available for purchase and has a reasonable cost to develop and maintain. So the city, over the last several years, has gone through extensive planning. It's almost mind-boggling, to be honest. The City of Chelan Comprehensive Plan, the City of Chelan Park Recreation and Open Space Plan, the City of Chelan Shoreline Management Program, the Shoreline Public Access Plan, and the Lake to the Lake. And so that's what we're trying to do is our very best to help meet that need. But this topic that we're discussing tonight is well backed by a number of extensive studies with probably hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of council and public deliberation. So once again, that's the entire study area, but the item that we're discussing tonight is the Spader Bay, roughly this undeveloped portion that you see, and it has some shoreline access along here. This is, I know it's a little difficult to read, but this is the architect's first rendering or outline of the plan. He'll be working on it. And our intent, at a minimum, we have had preliminary discussions with adjacent property owner, would be to have walk-in access and a system of trails that take one down to the lake shore and loop back up. So if we're able to expand on that access, we will. If the council approves the purchase and sale agreement, we have 90 days to work on access and easements, have the public process, and see the results of Mr. Brennan's study. But the trail would be considered the extension of the new trail from Don Morse to the roundabout, the paved trail, and of course we have plans for that north side trail to continue on all the way to the extent of the city limits. This is maybe not the very best photo, but this shows some of the view that you can capture from that site, and it really is quite remarkable to walk just 5 minutes and see and then stand on an undeveloped area and be able to enjoy a view of the lake. So we will have, as I mentioned, stakeholder, public, and advisory committee meetings leading up to this. And at this time, what I'll do is leave this slide up, and then I want to turn the council's attention to the purchase and sale agreement in the packet and hit just the highlights so the public is aware of them. So as you speak to this issue tonight, you're familiar. And then as we move forward with the discussion, if council would like more information on the purchase and sale agreement itself, then we'll be happy to cover that. Many of the terms are somewhat boilerplate. The key terms, council, if you look at page 2, is that the offer price that the city would be making under this agreement is $400,000 for the property. And if you look at Article 3, Section 3.02, this would give the purchaser, the city, a 90-day period to do all public diligence, all public meetings, tests, studies, surveys, inspections, reviews, anything that the city desires to do to make a final decision. And the city would also have the unconditional right, for any reason or no reason at all, to terminate this agreement. If we elect to terminate it, we need to notify the seller within the 90-day period. And the intent of that was to be able to make some commitment to the seller if they accept these terms, and allow the city to expend the time and energy to develop plans for the site and to work toward securing easements, which is difficult to do if there is not some level of commitment on the city's behalf. So we've been discussing this for some time with the realtor that represents this potential sale, and now we've arrived, I guess, at this crossroads to determine if there's enough interest to move forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain any discussion that council would like to have.
Council, any comments?
Clarify for me, if you would. So let's say we go ahead with this. Let's say that we find that the terms, and we weigh it with the other access possibilities, and we decide we want to go ahead with this. Will this come again before the council?
Yes, this will come back to city council, so.
This cannot be executed without another.
Well, the mayor can execute the purchase and sale agreement, but what we won't do is let the sale occur without returning to city council. So you will have an opportunity to say this, the council wishes to terminate this purchase and sale agreement.
The document makes it sound like the mayor has sole responsibility for that. It doesn't sound like the council's involved, and once we say yes, or if we say yes today, it doesn't feel to me like it comes back to us. It feels like the staff and the mayor have the decision whether to terminate or conclude.
Well, we can go on record and we can schedule the meeting tonight that it will come back to city council for mayor to receive direction. And council needs to know that the codes and statutes are full of opportunities for city managers or mayors to move forward, but obviously for practical reasons you just don't do that. And so we commit to coming back to the city council, but this would authorize the mayor to execute. If this is how, again, we can change this, but this authorizes the mayor to execute this purchase and sale agreement if they agree at that price. And if they do not agree at that price, then we'll have to return to the city council.
And the question though is who has the power to terminate or the power to conclude? And that's what feels like it's missing.
So the city council, Quentin, can we write that somehow into the agreement?
Yeah, we certainly.
Yeah, let's include that in the agreement, to make it clear, final decision to be made by city council within the 90-day discovery period. So we will add that right into the purchase and sale agreement.
Thank you.
90 days feels like a pretty fast turnaround. When are we going to see Brandon and stuff?
So he's working on it now. He's made a commitment to have that to us in advance of the 90-day period. So he's gonna have that to us by early November.
So then we'd be able to have that. So essentially this agreement is indicating that we're committing to including this piece of property in the overall 8 or 18, the evaluation of all of the waterfront access park sites that we want to evaluate. That report comes back. We have an opportunity to look at what those 8 properties are, and we may say, you know what, instead of spending $400 grand to buy this piece of property, we could potentially be using that to improve these top 3 sites.
Absolutely.
Of that report.
Absolutely.
So we have that opportunity within these 90 days to really, this purchase and sale agreement is just indicating that we want this piece to be evaluated along with all of the other 18 properties or whatever that are already city-owned pieces of land.
That's correct.
And then we have a city council, we have a workshop most likely where we'll evaluate those, and we can talk about the best use of this 400 that we've committed, whether it's because we just don't know on this property.
That's exactly right.
And it may come back that there are 3 to 5 other sites that have a much larger benefit to the community, that have access to the water. We have space to improve it. It will cost less than $400,000 to improve these spots, and at that point, we can make an informed decision across all 18 or however
Yes.
many sites that we
Yes.
have, and then move forward from there.
That's correct. And as I said, Quentin will write something into the agreement, to give you some comfort there. But that's always been the intent, and because that report from Brendan obviously will come back to the council, by Mr. Brendan himself, we'll have the stakeholder meetings, all that information will come back to council in advance of the 90-day period. And we can also extend the 90-day period if it's required. And I think what we need to remember is, we're a buyer, you may have other buyers out there, and, believe me, I thought about this and discussed it with Quentin, but it's, how do you move forward without some level of commitment? In fact, just bringing this, I felt like, okay, so I called Vindeluck, and Mr. Brennan and I went up and visited with them and started to have some discussion. It's hard to just walk in and say, when we start to talk, and especially when we start looking at easements and.
Hypothetically, yeah, I get
Right,
it.
right, it's very difficult to do. This
Yeah.
shows a level of commitment, but also gives us great comfort to get out of this agreement. As Quentin has drafted into this, the city can get out for any reason or no reason at all. So you have complete control and discretion.
So I'm looking at the J. Brennan contract from last council meeting, and will he deliver these things on 8 properties? We are providing the photo, we are providing GIS data, we're providing easements and legal access, and we're providing field notes and a sketch plan showing existing parking at street and sites. So he's going to be providing feasibility on those 8 sites that we choose.
Well, actually, so here is how it's developing. The staff has been tremendous, both Craig Gilroy and Thomas Tupling, who, working in the field, Tom has a lot of experience with this. And so as we were talking today, I told Jim, and we've agreed, what we're gonna deliver, we're gonna inventory every single site. So we want a complete inventory, so nobody has to backtrack over this ground again.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna identify through a photo, and Jim's been taking photos, and he's out walking Spader Bay. Well, he may have left by now, but he was on his way out of town to walk Spader Bay. Then we're gonna include a photo, and then we're gonna tell, we may hurt some feelings, we're just gonna state, we're not saying what's gonna happen, what's happened to that property. Whether someone's put up a gate, built a breakwater, whatever the case may be. And then we'll take all of those and select with council and the public the 8 sites that we want to see a concept plan on. If we move forward with Spader Bay, it will include a concept plan. And this is just what Jim has sketched so far, but it'll be a very nice concept plan and outline the uses and where the trail might go. I think this is his 3rd visit when he was leaving town to speak with the owners. We went and had lunch and met with Stephanie. Actually, Larry was out of town, but I talked to Larry on the telephone. So there would be 8 properties decided on by council, plus Spader Bay.
And parking is a consideration on all of those pieces of property?
It will inventory the parking on all of those. They won't all necessarily include parking. You might have to bicycle to some.
But it'll provide enough information where we can say, yeah, this is a great piece of property, but there's a severe lack of parking, so it
Yes.
kind of deems it unusable unless it's a
Yes.
major burden to the surrounding
Yes,
neighborhood.
or unless it's, bike or walking only, or whatever the case may be.
Okay,
Because we're not necessarily anticipating parking on this site.
right.
And that again, that'll be up to council as we work through this, but what we've said is minimal is that you access it from the north trail by walking. And if we can get some parking closer, and I believe we're still looking, but I believe, there is some parking on city streets now with the new improvements made by WashDOT, where there's room for people to park along there, so that'll all be part of what we're looking at.
Who picked the 90-day window of time for the due diligence?
I don't know if that's typical, or I let Quentin draft that.
It's typical, it was
It just seems for the complexity of the number of elements we're dealing with, 90 seems like.
Yeah, and I will say this now that I think back, so, the Realtor, I discussed that quite a bit with the Realtor, and he felt 90 days, if we wanna put 120 in there, you know, it just depends on what terms they will accept. We know the property's been there for a long time, and yet, you know, if you want the property, you know, just, I guess we just need to understand that.
When we started this discussion in May or June, looking at that piece of property, we started out as an executive session, kind of unfolded after that. It was more simple, that was the piece, and in fact, the Brennan contract, as I look at it now, it looks like it was tweaked from that original goal of just looking at O'Neill. Now it's including the 8 spaces also, but even the final document, where he breaks out costs, it just still just says O'Neill, Richard at the top of it. So it's become a much more complex project, and I'm concerned that 90 days doesn't really give us time. It would, if all we were doing was O'Neill, that would be a sensible process. But because we're gonna be weighing and measuring and trying to evaluate these alternatives alongside it, I don't know that 90 is enough to do.
Apparently we can't extend it if we need to, is that correct?
it can be extended by mutual agreement, so.
That doesn't solve what I'm suggesting.
So all I can say is that Jim and I have had this heart-to-heart a few times, and I don't know if you worked with Jim, but the amount we accomplished in the last 2 days is pretty incredible, but he feels he has no problem with 90 days. If we wanna put 120, put 120 and see how it goes. I can only say that the Realtor, and I'm sorry I didn't recollect right at the beginning, but now we did have quite a bit of discussion about, you know, how long can we wait. Now, you know, we all know it's been there a long time, it didn't just fall off the turnip truck, but on the other hand, you know, you just never know. Another fire might come along.
I wanna make sure that when we have our workshop, that we have all of the right information to make an informed decision. And to me, those things would be, there is some level of discussion around what parking is available. So if that's photographs or even Jim's walking around and looking at what parking is available.
Okay.
I wanna make sure that we understand, so not every property is going to be a turnkey piece of property. Access to the lake, there are going to be additional costs required to make each piece usable.
Right.
So understanding what even if it's a free city property, there's probably going to be additional funds needed to make improvements.
That's correct.
Same with the O'Neill piece of property. What, I guess, legal issues we're going to run into. So as you said, some of these pieces of property have been around forever, and they've just been assumed as private property. And I'm assuming there are going to be some barriers on those pieces of property. So understanding the full scope of what we're stepping into.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if this is gonna take 3 years of staff time, that shouldn't be discounted.
Yep.
I'll probably think more.
Okay. Get them
That's it.
to me, but those are great.
So Mike, I had a few comments. I wanted to thank you for, we've had 4 or 5 meetings on this now, before it's actually come to the public. And I know one of our most important pieces on this was the purchase price, so thank you for getting it down to, we're not even sure that this offer is gonna be accepted at
That's
that
right.
price.
That's right.
It's a huge donation if they do accept that price, because what they've been asking for it is 4 or 5 times that, right? So if it does happen and they do accept it, we move forward. If it doesn't, and we have it locked up at that price is the idea, but our most important, if I'm kind of summarizing for the council, our most important evaluation of this property, besides the finances and the funding of it, is what the public wants. And so what I just heard you say, that Brennan's report may not be ready till November, so I'm kinda chiming in on Ray's comment that we're well into our 90-day expiration of this purchase and sale agreement by the time we're seeing the reports, and our hope was to show those reports to the public and then really get a feel of what our public wants us to do, because it's really, that's who we wanna represent here. So I'm glad to see everybody here tonight. It is our 5th meeting on this. We've talked about it other times in public, so it's nice that it got out, and thanks to Cozy or whoever let us know, the social network, all the other, yeah. Cause I heard it on the radio myself this morning. I'm glad to see everybody here, but I'd like to make sure we have enough time to have our public comment, public hearings with his finished reports, and then we have time to kinda
Right,
move forward with
you
that.
know, it's hard to say the deliberation when he's done. Why don't we put 120 days in this
Right.
agreement right now? And I'll reinforce with Jim, because he told me he will be ready. But let's put 120 days.
You're saying he'd be ready in November, and I'm thinking he's been on the property now at least 3 times. He knows the town, he's familiar with our city. I'm surprised it's taken him 3 months to get us a.
Well, he's going to
write-up.
do it, all of the properties, so you can compare them and look at holistically this property. If it was only Spader Bay, he could deliver that much more promptly, but
Right.
you wanna be able to look at all of the properties and make a decision with limited funds. Do you approve these 3, or do you acquire this piece of property?
Right, well, I'm just trying to put some pressure on his completion of his
Right.
report, so we have it in a couple of weeks, and then we can start our process.
Right. Well, I'll be back on the phone with him, but in terms of,
He's only gotta work day and night to get that
yeah.
done.
Well, I think he's a hard worker, he's moving right along, but let's put 120 days, because it could even allow you to go into further deliberation. You may say, well, you know, we want another workshop, you know, we want a couple more weeks.
Well, public.
You know,
Yeah.
so I think I'm comfortable we could get it done in 90, rather than now we can have all the public deliberation
Right.
and work through.
Thank
And let's
you.
do that. Now, just to say one other thing is that, we worked real hard to put the notice out, and that's why you heard about this meeting, is because we advertised it, because we knew it was important to the community. So that wasn't an accident, and I thank Perry, our city clerk, for getting that out, but we deliberately put that information out.
Typically,
And Patty.
typically it
And
would
Patty.
not have been.
Patty.
Typically, it would
Correct,
not
we
have been.
advertised this the
Right.
same as we would a public
Right.
hearing, so the public was aware of the specific topic, rather than just picking up on it in the agenda.
So I read this document, and
Servando?
I was happy to see that we're going to take the public input. We talked about it several times here, and for us, for everybody, we have our reservations, our questions. We don't know if this is gonna be a good decision or not, but I think that we were all very consistent in the feeling that before we do anything, we gotta take the public in consideration. So I'm glad that everybody's here.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah. We'll start over.
So let's go down another path, and let's assume this purchase and sale agreement is not accepted. Would we continue to include this piece of property in, Jim's scope of work?
So here's the thing, and I'll just say this candidly, because it kind of came up. The city council is privileged to have executive sessions, and you never need to disclose the purpose of that meeting, other than in generality, that it's a potential acquisition. And so if that were to happen, then that's how we would approach this with city council. We would not negotiate publicly. And then after that, then we could come back and disclose what that is. So that's how that would occur.
Thank you.
I'm curious about Aaron's question. So let's assume we can't reach terms, we can't come to terms. Are we able to, this would be excluded from the Brennan study, then, is that correct?
It would be excluded to the extent that he hasn't completed the work. We've lit a fire under both of his feet, to get this done.
Mhm.
And so he's already invested some time, but he wouldn't invest any further. I think this component of all of his work is around $3,000. So you can't go too far south on this, but he needs to keep moving, because if he waits until we wrap this up, then, that's gonna cut into his time. But we had that discussion, and if anything left on the table, if we pull this, then we won't have to pay him for that.
Does that answer your question?
I wasn't concerned as much about the money as the scope of the project, so.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can simply remove with this one?
I'll say for the last 10 years, I think the analysis of the street ends and what options we have for water access or view access. So there's two different pieces there. There's where you can actually put your toes in the water, and then there's also loud and clear, over and over, limit development or keep some space available open without houses on them. This piece of property obviously falls into that camp. It's not a place where you're gonna run down and dive in the water and then climb back out.
Right.
But we have to address both sides of the commentary that we hear from the public over and over and over, and it's not always, you know, being able to jump in the water, but it's also, can we keep some of the land around Lake Chelan without homes? So I know there's been a lot of discussion around this piece of property, and it doesn't provide strict lake access, but we hear both sides of those pieces of commentary. And to not move forward and analyzing this piece of property so that we can make an informed decision 90 to 120 days from now, I think would be remiss, and it may not bubble to the top, but that's the process for the next 90 to 120 days, is to figure that out. What is the most dire need that people would like to see? But I think everyone needs to understand and evaluate all of those pieces of property with the same level of information. And we don't have enough information on this map. We don't have enough information on those 18 streets. We never have for 10 years plus. So I'm excited for that project.
Thank you, Aaron.
Just to talk about some of the zoning on this, it is single-family residential. It's 4 dwelling units per acre. I know the this property description says 15 single-family homes, but actually it can have up to 38 single-family homes on it. They can be clustered to 6,500 square foot lot size. So there is potential development, development potential on this piece of property. And then again, on public access, the Shoreline Management Act of Washington State says it's not just the ability to touch the water or get to the water. Public access is also viewing of the water. So it does meet our shoreline public access goals in the Shoreline Management Act of Washington State.
Well, I want to echo Aaron. I feel that this is a great opportunity, and we would be remiss not to at least investigate it for our community. So with that,
I was wondering.
I was gonna say, if you want.
We're going to open up for public comment. I will just make a couple of quick things. Greg made a very important thing. The flip side of this, I think as public stewards, we are doing what people have asked us to do. And when pieces are made available, we will look at them, analyze them. There's no done deal. There's no agenda here. It's strictly listening to people come to our council meetings or give emails to when there's public land made available. We'll shake it and look at it, and that's what we're doing. It was strictly for the Spader Bay was the number one project of this. I had heard in conversations going back 4 years with Tammy Haig on the street ends that we added on the 18. We started out with 8 and now it's grown to 18 to make sure that we do have every public owned. We don't have to go out and buy them. We may have to improve them, but that's why it's being added on to this scope of work. So we are going to open up for public comment, and we do have 3 minutes. We're not going to yank you off there with a cane or anything, but please be respectful to everybody in the room for their time. And as I read your name, come to the podium, say your name and address, and give us your 3 minutes. And if somebody afterwards wants to continue on, go ahead and do it. We're here for you. So the first person that signed up is Alice Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, can I say something, please?
Yes.
So for everybody that goes to the podium, we want to get everybody's name correct, so if you could please spell your name for us, that would be super helpful, and we don't need your street address. Chelan is fine, but we do have a hard time sometimes when people don't sign in to spell their names properly, so if you would
If you
spell your
don't
name.
sign in, that is.
But, yes, well, even when they sign in, sometimes it's hard to read the names, but if you would spell your last name, it'd be super helpful. Thank you. And I will have a timer.
Alice?
Thank you.
Okay, well, you're 1 minute into your.
Thompson, T-S-O-N. I live with Wenatchee. I put my address down there. You want me
We
to-
got it.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right, good. My sisters and I own our family home on Spader Bay Road. Our parents, Harvey and Betty Cooper, bought the property in the early 50s. It was our summertime go-to place on weekends. I know firsthand about the steep, hilly, rocky terrain on the backside of our property that the city is looking to purchase. Rocks and soil continue to move downhill. It sloughs off with a heavy rain or winter thaw or just because. When the lake level is down from the fall to the spring, we walk along the beach. The 700-foot waterfront of this piece of property has no beach. It is rocky and steep right down to the shoreline, as you have indicated. This property does not have deeded access. On one end is Spader Bay Road, a private narrow road that we help maintain. Our city garbage trucks only drive down to empty the trash containers in the late spring to early fall. The rest of the year, we pack the trash to the top of Spader Bay Road and put it into big dumpsters. It is understandably why Mike Jackson, a city administrator, stated the property can't accommodate a road for vehicle traffic. The other end of the property is closed off by the lookout gate. Access will be a definite hurdle. The property will serve as a connector to the new paved trail from Don Morris Park to the roundabout. I'm assuming, therefore, that access to the property would be limited to only people who are traveling by trail. Making it safe for the public will be a big issue to address. Do citizens of Chelan want to spend $1 million plus interest for 20 years for a trail? We sisters decided to find out. We spent Monday morning in front of the post office. We had information on the property proposal to share with people on the street. The majority of the citizens we talked with felt the cost of the project was too high for the benefit. We had 32 people opposed enough to sign a no to the proposal list we provided. There are other potential public accesses to the lake that you are considering. Take this property proposal off the list. It could become an albatross around our neck.
Thank you. Next up is Connie Smith.
Let's talk about my name is Connie Cooper-Smith. I live in Spader Bay. Let's talk about the financing on the Spader Bay proposal. It's right in the agenda. And they say that it's impractical to use a general fund because of the impact on operating fund reserve balances. And also, number two, the impact that such a large commitment of cash to a land purchase would have on the city's ability to fund other capital group improvements, including street and park improvements. Boy, we really need some park improvements as far as putting more things for kids to do here in the summer. We have more kids coming here all the time. We should do something about our parks. We also could use some sidewalk improvement. We have some streets that could really use improvement, so I think we need to think about this. Therefore, it's proposed to use REIT, real estate excise tax funds. There's already 3 other projects using these funds. The RV park bathroom renovation loan, which is paid off in 2023. The library bond issue, which is paid off in 2027. And the 2018 bond issue for bridge and RV park improvements, which is paid off in 2031. As stated in the report, REITs are highly volatile and difficult to predict. In an economic downturn, it's possible there wouldn't be enough REIT funds to cover debt service obligations. Economic downturn would also affect the general fund, I would think, negatively. J.A. Grunin has at least one public presentation planned. We citizens should get equal presentation time at that meeting to give a rebuttal. To be fiscally responsible, family unit. Big purchases should be discussed and researched first. Who's really benefiting and who's really paying for it? If you want usable lake access, this property isn't it. If you want a loop trail, this property isn't it. If you just want to sit and look at the lake for $1 million, well, and this includes the sale price and the upgrades, this is it. For $1 million, you can look at the lake. Is that worth it for this community? We took pictures, and as you can see, I just took these pictures 3 days ago, and as you can see, this shoreline is not friendly to swimming or anything else. And I'm quite sure the EPA is gonna give you a hard time if you try and change the fish habitat or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Anita Rutter. There are seats up front if anybody would like them.
Hi, I'm Anita Rutter, R-U-T-T-E-R. I'm the last of the three sisters to talk. My biggest question is, how is this property beneficial to area residents? Benefits to look out are easy to see. It's an area developed largely for vacation rentals and out-of-towners. The overview statement was, the property would be used for parks, recreation, and open space. So far, the only thing we're looking at is open space, and maybe a bike walk trail. Our concerns include road access. In the proposal, it was suggested to acquire all 3 access routes. How are you going to accomplish that? Spader Bay residents maintain and pave that road, and plow it, and take our garbage up. A road to the top property was estimated, this is in the overview statement, estimated to be between $200,000 to $350,000. Is that included in the $1.4 million cost? Point 2, if more than a trail is planned, i.e. maybe a park, what are the budgeted costs of amenities, such as garbage, water, sewage, power, bathrooms, daily cleaning, once a week, snow removal, etc.? EPA considerations, soil contamination studies. It is old orchard land. Clay soil erosion. My sister mentioned every spring, doesn't matter, it's clay soil and the rocks come down, the road has to be cleared. Wetlands. Trails to the lake, even though it's very steep. You could put a trail down there, but it's going to be steep and rocky, not safe after dark, liability to the city. Fish habitat. This is great bass country, folks. Great bass. Bass boats come in all the time into Spader Bay. We have a resident deer population of about 10. Eagles and hawks in the spring. Instead of spending $1.4 million on Spader Bay, consider that other expenditures that benefit citizens. Road improvements, sidewalks, playground maintenance, and maybe a pool. This summer, I took my grandchildren to Don Morris Park. The materials under the playground equipment is not adequate for safety. There needs to be increased police presence during the summer to prevent bridge jumpers. A city law not enforced and a huge liability to the city. Buoys were placed to provide a no-wake zone. Enforcement was sketchy at best and largely ignored by many voters. I don't blame the city for wanting to jump on 9+ acres for $400,000. From an initial asking price of that land, $2,195,000, it's gone down to $400,000. Special gift. But like they say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Although on more than one occasion, our horses have sneezed nasal discharge on our faces. Not pleasant. Good luck.
Thompson, Thonpson. I don't have a prepared agenda here. I just have a couple of questions. From what I've gathered from the data that's out there in the media, this is a $400,000 purchase, and then there's a development fee of about $600,000, depending on how wide the road is they're gonna finally build. From how they're gonna get access, I'm not sure yet. I see how the trail's gonna get access through vendor lock. If it's $1 million, the media says the first payment is gonna be $74,000. And that's not very much money for 1 year, but this is gonna go on for 20 years. So for 20 years, the city council is gonna be responsible for $74,000 payments for the first year, and then there's gonna be a depreciation because some of the $74,000 will go towards the balance of the $1 million. But this is gonna be a considerable obligation. This is not a 1-year transaction. This is not taking out of city funds that are available. This looked like an entire loan. And the obligation's gonna go for 20 years, and I guess I've been on the property. The property to me is unusable. Certainly with enough money, you could develop anything. The permit process of excavation on the shoreline is gonna be very difficult. They can develop trail system probably reasonably well. The media said they were gonna look at a road. The road's gonna be a little more difficult. There's gonna have to be restrooms, trash containers down there to meet the public's needs. Otherwise, the people will leave toilet paper everywhere. This is not a simple acquisition. This is gonna be a commitment of 20 years of somehow there's gonna be some kind of law enforcement. There's gonna be some kind of pickup and cleanup. This is a very difficult decision for the council, because what you decide today as council people is gonna go on for 20 years. Think about it.
Thank you. And we have Marilyn Sargent next up. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Sargent. That's Marilyn. Sargent is Sargent. I live on Spader Bay Road, and I think one of my big concerns with this property is really ingress and egress. When the roundabout was getting developed, we were assured that we wouldn't be impacted, and what happened was the gravel road that goes through our property kind of became a way around the construction, and we had a considerable amount of traffic going that way. And I mean, we've put up signs. We started out with the nice one, a private driveway, you know, then we started with beware of dogs, and then we started doing one way you do not enter. And I saw one that said my property is protected by a backhoe, and I considered that, and opted not to put that out. But I'm concerned with this piece of property. Are people going to stick to the trail, or are they going to go on the lower road that goes through our property, the private gravel road? And what we have found is just that when you do get people coming across a property like that, you know, there are people who are probably very good people normally, and then there are people that are on vacation, and sometimes that changes how they look at the world, and sometimes we have to deal with that. I think one of the concerns I have is just safety. When I look at that land and I say, what's the best use of this property? In some ways I say, well, maybe if you're into rock climbing, it would be a good way to utilize the property. But if someone falls, how are you gonna get an ambulance in there? If there's a fire, how are you gonna get a fire truck in there? How are you gonna turn a fire truck around? How are you gonna turn an ambulance space for doing something, like that. I do think it's important to recognize that the O'Neills are kind of in a tough position here. Their property in 2006, this acreage was valued at $65,000. Today, it's on the county tax rolls at over $1.1 million. And they're paying over $10,000 a year just in taxes on the property. So, you know, a basic tenet of business is that you can't have the expense without the revenue. And they have no revenue to pay those taxes. And so I can see where there is incentive for them to do something, to come to some kind of a deal. So when I hear that it's $400,000 compared to what it's on the county tax rolls, that is a substantial discount, but it sounds like it's being negotiated. I think my biggest concern with this property is what can we do to mitigate the impacts to the residents that live around it? What can we do to make sure that safety and security are handled? I know right now it's kind of a party spot because it's remote, and you know, just having people hike in there probably won't stop that activity from occurring. I don't see how you're ever going to get canoes, kayaks, things like that down to the water from this piece of property. I don't think it's possible.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Olson, O-L-S-O-N. I do not live on Spader Bay. First, I want to thank, I've been coming before the council several times a month for the last 4 years. It all started out with our friend Steve Klein, who, by the way, wanted to run for mayor this term. And we started looking at what are the issues in Chelan. And of course, housing was foremost. There's a great program underway on that. But we started looking at all the help wanted signs in the windows, and that led to the housing. And in our discussion with people, they started talking about what are the major issues in Chelan, and it was lake access, time and time again, just as you pointed out to the programs up here. So I want to thank you for finally, in my appearance is finally, you're taking an interest in getting more access to the lake. Right now, the public has access of about 1% to Lake Chelan. And we started looking at other communities. I talked to you before about them. Wenatchee, extensive parks on the waterfront. Pateros, Adia, Brewster, Chelan Falls. Recently, I was down in Tri-Cities, and they have 2 major bridges there, just like Wenatchee does, about the same distance apart, 5 miles. They have a waterfront park from one end to the other, and the public has access to it all. I appreciate you going after this site, but it's a bad site. Meanwhile, across the lake, there's 6 acres on the waterfront sitting there. And it's been sitting there, since I said last week, since I was in grade school. That's how long it's been there. It's sitting there. It's my understanding that the building permit application is in now for the Sunset condominiums. That's 33 condos jammed in next to the clubhouse there. Goodfellow Brothers also has plans, and I have a copy at home. I didn't bring it tonight, I usually do. But they have planned for about 60 condominiums on the Three Fingers and the plateau above. It's my understanding that they've gone through their pre-application meetings. We're expecting that to come in any time now to develop that site. We have the best lake in the Northwest, perhaps in the Western United States, perhaps the entire country. We have visitors here from around the world, but we do not give them or ourselves access to the lake. Mike mentioned the 1927 study and resolution. The resolution was that on Boulevard Avenue, the public would always have access to the lake from that site. This city council in 1977 reconfirmed that there would always be access to the lake. there's a site above or a map above the city clerk over there that shows the site, and it shows the property that the state owns, the city owns, and Goodfellow Brothers owns. We then took a look at how do you access property from a seller who doesn't want to sell. We contacted one of the best attorneys in the state on this issue. He issued us a letter. It's in the planning department files. I gave a copy to you before also. You first identify a public need, a definite public need. We have that, you're recognizing it. You then have to demonstrate that there are no other options. There aren't any that I'm aware of. You're going after a site like this because there's nothing else available. There's no other point. Condemnation is very easy according to the attorney. Now you say, Mike, when you and I talked directly, we're not gonna do it, we can't do it. The city and their partner, the state, did it 7 times to get the roundabout in. The Harris Oil Company from South Dakota didn't like that. The property is still in their name, as the last time I checked. The only thing you can argue out over is price. It's a done deal once you decide you're gonna do it. But you better get the letter of intent in before those condominiums go in, because then it'll never happen. I always appreciate Steve Wright, the executive director of the Chelan County PUD. He says it's incumbent for public servants to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people for the greatest period of time. And that's what we should be looking at.
Thank you, John.
My name is Evie Hirschberger. Do I need to spell it? I think I've been, well, not quite as often as John, but I've been here as many times on similar situations and similar concerns. And I didn't realize until I got a little more clarification tonight that when I saw that you were voting on this, I thought it was kind of like a done deal. I appreciate the fact that we are going to get another public comment. I do think it's really important that we look over these things. But I also agree with John and some other people that I think we have better options. I live across, I see the Spader Bay from my house, and I have a really hard time envisioning, other than what you said, a view of the lake on any more usages of that property that would really constitute spending that much. I would hope that we could find out of those 18 or the additional other ways to find something a little more usable than that acreage there. So I appreciate again your time and your energy that you're putting into this. I really hope that we can find something better than that.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Good evening. Skip Morehouse, Chelan. Morehouse, in case you forgot. But thanks for the opportunity to speak. I had the opportunity to speak to 5 different council people today about this issue. And after talking to them, I share the concerns of pretty much everyone. And I think this whole idea of a purchase agreement is a rush. I agree with the 3 sisters and the comments about the safety. Unlike most of you here, back in 67, 68, and 69, I did walk along that beach. And since then, I walked up on the hillside, and it is very dangerous. And even to put a walkable trail in there is going to require a significant amount of work. And once you got it in, it's not going to make it safe necessarily. Because we do have rainstorms. If you've ever been in one of our clouds burst, where you get 3 inches of rain, boom, somebody's out there. These people do not respect nature very much. I've discovered at skiing on the mountain that people go skiing when it's all iced up. I've skied for 10 years up there, and I cower back inside after one run into the shed. So, also I want to disclose that I know Guy Evans and I worked for him. I also know Linda Parlett. I've testified in front of the state legislature, and I've also done work for her and her mother Jesse O'Neill, who lives on the property, so I'm here about the citizens of this city and the liability issues that have been mentioned, the access and the usability of this as a real park, which has been mentioned. And I just don't really see, well, earlier it was mentioned it was the mayor and Mike Jackson that jumped on this issue and brought it forward, which is good in terms of looking at it. But it probably could have been handled in executive session and or being out on the property, because I know some of the council members have been out on it as to the practicability of what's going on there. The thing that wasn't necessarily pointed out is, and it happened up lake many years ago, there was access put to trails, then a fire was started. And a significant fire started up lake. Same thing could happen out here if you put more people into that property. Even if they weren't there and started, if they left a piece of glass, which starts fire, or plastic, which starts fires. There's just a lot of hazards there, in addition to just the total dangerousness of the rocky shore. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Johnny Evans up next.
Council, the Guy Evans, EBANS, here in Chelan. Well, I am the realtor that represents this parcel, so my aunt and mom are the owners of this. And I just wanted to offer a little bit of commentary on the real estate side, as well as just some personal observations. And I'll maybe start with my personal observations, which will put me probably on the opposite side of many of the neighbors that I know here, which is to say, there's just some, from my way of looking at the opportunity, some great views, trail access, and just connection with that North Shore Trail that was described. And I realize that does not speak to everyone's recreational goals, and so I'm not suggesting that everybody get super excited about that. But if you like to walk or run or just kind of get out and take in some good views, this would be an opportunity that would allow all of those things within a real short distance from downtown. On the real estate side, it's really hard to figure out what a piece of property like this is worth. I'm the third realtor, believe it or not. It started out at $4 million, and it was down to 3.5, 3, and then my aunt came to me when I started doing independent real estate in 2016 and said, hey, I'd like you to list this, and I just said no several times because I knew not only was it going to be hard to sell, but it would involve a hard conversation with her about what that value was. And so what we did is basically create a pro forma and figure out, okay, how many home sites is this property going to service based on the zoning, access, and other things, and what's it going to bear in terms of the profit that you're going to make after sales costs and improvement costs. How long do you think the market's going to take to absorb that? And you factor all those things in and you end up with the numbers at the very end. And I think we came out of the gates at 2.25 million, which was north of where I wanted to be, but lower than where she wanted to be. And we've kind of inched our way down. We're getting closer to where I thought the value was originally, and I think that's reflected in the number of phone calls that I've been getting. I had one this past weekend. I personally took a client up there 3 weeks ago. So you always know you're kind of getting close when the phone starts ringing. It's just, it's a mile from downtown Chelan, 700 feet of waterfront that is very challenging. I think we all would agree there in terms of topography. But Chelan is a changing place due to Seattle and its influence, predominantly with its economic boom. And that's going to continue to put pressure on the valley. And so it's just a matter of time before someone says, you know what, I'm going to take that on as a project. And time and money will solve the issues with this particular parcel that have kept it from selling to date. So I'm just here basically in agreement that we need more data. We need to have a plan shown with some of the issues addressed that were brought up. And my encouragement would be that, you know, you approve the administrator to take that PSA with the mayor to my clients. I'll tell you, it's less than they were imagining, so, you know, there may be some conversations there that would render tonight largely a moot point. I can't speak for that, but I do think at least it deserves the conversation.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Is that appropriate?
It's not, but go ahead.
I love this. 14 home sites, would those be scattered through the whole piece? Where would those be?
Right, so it's hard to imagine, but if you go out with somebody that is experienced in moving dirt around, you know, you see how it can be done. And there's certainly some geotech issues, but those can be overcome. It's just certainly a higher development cost than what we're used to. That's why it's obviously not built on. But if you go to more valuable places in the U.S., you see some pretty crazy structures in amazing places. And I don't think they're going to get built next year. But the trend line of our valley appears to be heading upward. And so that's where, you know, at some point that the value proposition is going to intersect with the market demand.
But there are actually 14 buildable sites within that piece of property.
It can be done. Yeah, it wouldn't be what you would imagine as, you know, a nice neighborhood with I mean, it's steep, right? You can put homes in some remarkable places and roads for that matter.
Can't we just look around the corner already on that view, see those homes that are there built on the rocks? Or go to Manson and look where they're putting houses that you couldn't even get a tractor down, and they have to almost helicopter the lumber in, but they're doing it and they're living there. And this site will be built on eventually if we don't tie it up, in my opinion. I agree with you, Guy.
Next up is Stan Morris. Craig, while we're waiting here, one more time on the, what is it zoned for?
It is single family residential, 4 dwelling units per acre, so about 38 lots. And
Okay.
I would agree with it can be built on.
Okay. Stan, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. So, a little bit of a different take on utility of property. I live out in Lakeside, which is the other side of the lake from Spader Bay. And there are 20 days during the summer when the neighborhood is inundated with people. And during those 20 days, it's really hard to get lake access. For the other 345 days of the year, you can run wild down a Lakeside Park or Don Morris Park. Pretty much just tremendous access to the lake. And believe me, I can see the lake pretty much anywhere. I can see it from roads, streets, whatever. This city has so many real needs. I would note that the rainstorm that came out in Lakeside about a month ago and washed out along the edge of the road, the city hasn't bothered to come out yet and fill the undercut where it's undercutting the road and undercut some more today. So maintenance over time has really been a problem for the city, and I can't imagine what 9 acres of a hillside with clay soil sloughing off is going to take in terms of maintenance. Maintenance, like for instance in the building that council member Allen is in, the men's restroom's been closed all this summer because the roof needs repairs. We haven't been able to get around to that and finance that. We have low pressure water pressure in our neighborhoods. My home street above me, High Street, is unpaved. It's a dirt road. There's so many real needs. So I don't understand why there's a purchase and sale agreement on the table. What you're talking about is a document that reportedly we can get out of at some time in the future. And I've practiced real estate law for 40 years. That's called an option to purchase. So why don't you just pay them $5,000 for an option to purchase? And Aaron, your comment about dire need and about public input being important, this city has initiative and referendum power. You can simply say to the voters, what do you want to do? And I'm going to say to the people in this room, how many people are in favor of this project being bought? Let's see a raise of hands. 1. How many people are against it? And let's see a raise of hands. everybody else in the room. If ever there were a situation for initiative and referendum, if ever there was a clear voice of the public saying, we want to be heard, this is it. And if you just blindly go ahead and vote on this tonight in the face of this kind of opposition, filling the council room with people that are negative, then you might as well say public input really isn't that important to us. You need to put this on the ballot. Give the O'Neill family a fair purchase option, dollar figure. Ask them to hold it open for the next 6 months. They haven't sold for years and years. And I like Guy's candidness. It's a tough property. And then put it before a vote of the people. And make your case. And let the people in this room make their case. And let the people speak about it. It's these people who you presume are going to be using this property. Let them have their say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question since Dan took a quick poll of the room? Who would rather see 14 homes on this piece of property?
I would say 14 homes on it.
Okay.
Transition.
Those are the things that we think about, like, it isn't just
It's a
today
good
and
question.
the lake property, it's what's gonna happen to this piece of property 20 years from now, and do we have the foresight that may have been missed many years ago in buying up lake access? We don't want 20 years from now, when there's 14, how many homes can go up there? 38 homes. That, why didn't we do something? So those are the things that we think about, not just today. So, thank you for your raising of hands.
Sue, welcome.
My name is Sue Mowat. Hi, my name is Sue Mowat, M-O-U-A-T. Been a resident of Chelan for over 20 years. And we have watched development go on for quite a long while now with concerns that I have. And my concern right now is looking at this map and seeing that this park will be accessible mostly to the lookout. And that is because the access, if there's not adequate parking, how are people going to get into there besides the people that can walk down to the lookout? That is one point. The other point I have is the lovely sidewalk that goes from the roundabout into town that is safe for people to walk on, is enjoyed by everybody. But why isn't some money put into extending a sidewalk further on the lake to the people that come down from Boyd? I happen to work at Lake Chelan Shores. People want to walk into town all the time. It's not safe. So it's another possible consideration. The other thing was.
We are, just to let you know, we are.
Good.
It's in the
Okay.
plans.
Good, I'm very glad to hear that. The other thing is I worry about a great deal since the 2015 fire, is all the new homes that are being built, the traffic involved, and the access for people getting in and out of here with the fire. I think the money could be spent for something that might be considerably more important than a park, and a park that I think is gonna strictly benefit the lookout. That's all I
Thank you
have to
for your
say.
comments. Are there any? Is there anyone else in the audience that cares to speak? Come to the podium and state your name.
Bob Getty, G-O-E-D-E-E. There are several aspects of this. How many citizens of this valley are gonna use that? I know there's some walkers and that, but most of this valley is retirees. You're not gonna have those people walking down and look at it. And every time you take something off the tax rolls and buy it by the government, of which 80+% of this county is already owned by the government, you add that much more burden to the taxpayers to make up the difference on every increasing budget. If you're looking at what that's gonna look like at 14, you already have 300 on the hillside above it. You won't even notice them. Well, I think there's other places that you own, the Water Street, Park Street, those kind of things make a lot more difference. Investing in them with small docks and areas that you pull your boat up to, rather than buy this landlocked. I feel sorry for the O'Neills that they're getting stuck that kind of value, but that shows you what our property taxes are doing around here. They're not gonna go down anymore. I think you really need to look at other places that make more benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we public? Any further comments on the council or questions?
Yes, I have a couple
Please.
questions. So is this property, what is the necessary need to lock it up as part of this purchase agreement to evaluate it as part of the 18 sites
Lock it up with the seller?
with this agreement?
Well, just what's included in the purchase and sale agreement before you, other than the deposit value which we reserved for negotiation with the seller. And of course, it would require agreement by the seller. So right now, we're talking to the seller's representative, and, so we'll see if, but that would tie the property up, like we said, for 90 days.
120.
Or 120 days, and include a clause that the council makes the final decision. Did that answer your question?
I'm wondering why Jim couldn't evaluate this property without the purchase and sale agreement.
Well, he could, you could. Whether or not we pursue an easement and that type of thing, but the conversation was to make this known to the public so we could get public comment, and that exposes it to some risk for purchase. So if you're confident it wouldn't be purchased, then we could take whatever time we want. So we could continue with what we're doing to answer your question, and in all likely cases, it may not be purchased. So you could do that, and we could spend the $3,000 with Jim. That's no problem.
He'll continue on the other 18 sites and
Yep.
still evaluate
Yep.
this property
Yes,
as well.
yes, we could do that without this agreement, yes.
But my understanding, what the agreement does is begin to fine tune actually what the cost would be of the property, what the seller would be willing to take for it. There's other aspects of whether or not we purchase this that would be accomplished with an agreement that would not be accomplished without one.
Yes, that's correct. That's my opinion.
I think that's why you brought this to us,
That's right.
because you could decide that maybe you like it, but you don't know what the price agreement might be.
Sure, do you like it at 1.3 million? I don't know.
Yeah, so.
I like it at 400,000.
Well, what is tough, and
My understanding that's what we're gonna do. Excuse me.
being respectful to the whole community, it's nice to have all the commentary here. I hope we all understand this is a small portion of our community here today. And so as we move forward with this, being able to have public comment from everybody is hugely important. Naturally, those at Spader Bay are gonna be impacted significantly, but we do wanna look at the benefit for the community as a whole. So there's much consideration, and I feel like this is such a challenging topic for us. Having said that, I can't help but wonder if the public comment might have been better served a little bit sooner, so that some of the things that we brought up and the fact that this is not a done deal, this is just giving us the permission to move forward and do our due diligence. Some of the comments afterwards seemed like there was a little bit of angst and tension toward us, and we're trying to do our best for the entire community, so please just understanding that.
Well said.
I have one other comment too, just to point this out, that we keep talking about $1 million, $1.5 million here, and we haven't heard anybody say anything about buying the land and owning it and not doing anything with it, just leaving it the way it is, just like it's always been. It doesn't have to have trails on it, it doesn't have to be developed or have a park or have anything on it. We haven't decided to spend the money to do that, but you can't do that unless you own it. It's interesting though, for me to see how many people would like to see 15, 20, 30 houses on it, rather than having nothing on it. I'd really like to know what the public thinks about that. And Stan's idea of a referendum, although I don't know how you do that with, here's 5 choices, everybody please vote on which choice, prioritize 5 choices. That I don't think you can do that on a referendum. But that would be the information I would really like to see. In my mind's eye, and I'm fairly new to town, I've only been here 10 years, I would just like to see it stay the way it is. And it won't stay that way unless we act on it. Whether there's a trail through it, or a bench on it somewhere, or just sits rocky and natural is not been determined yet, but we know it's gonna get built on. As this price drops and developers come in, they can build on anything, and there will be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 houses there. I would just bet in the next 20 or 30 years. So that's, we're trying to think of that, sitting here in this chamber now.
And as Aaron mentioned, you know, being able to have some forethought that wasn't around when the planning of our community happened. You know, it would have been great if parks had been planned way back when, so we're trying to fill the needs with what is available.
One of the things that I think about, there are groups that we have in our community that specialize in land preservation, getting open space. The trails groups, the Douglas Land Trust, that's kind of their mission statement, is to get open space and make open space. I don't know that I'm comfortable that that's the city's job to do, to make open space happen. I agree it'd be nice not to have houses built on there, but the neighborhood is full of houses. That hill is full of houses already. Have we looked at that option of trying to bring in somebody else alongside the land trust or the trails group to try and see if that might be a solution to this thing? If preservation is really what we want, and that's, as we talk about what you can do there, we know that it's very limited. Should we look at those options rather than the city saying, we're the only ones who can do this and we're gonna take cash to do it?
We could explore those. We already have one on the table, so I don't know how many asked. I did talk to the Trust for Public Land if they would assist with this acquisition. And they, in terms of easements, and they said no, only on properties that they are trying to acquire. I didn't ask them directly, but they didn't offer, to take the lead.
And rather than a purchase and sale, I guess my world, I see a purchase and sale, even though we may put a contingency in there that says council gets another run at this thing. But I see a purchase and sale as we're gonna buy this. I mean, you're making a commitment to buy it. Has the option piece of that been explored? Is that a tool that we could use now that's short of saying we're gonna buy this property?
We could go back and explore that in my conversations with the seller's representative and in other ways that I've portrayed this. It was a purchase and sale agreement. So, there's a universe of options, and we can certainly go back. If that's what we'd like to do, we can certainly do that.
Council, any other comments?
So we're looking at approximately 120 to 180 days for Brennan to complete his study. Okay. Correct.
So what we said, we've changed the option period or the period of the purchase and sale agreement to 120 days. So that's what we would put in. Right now is 120 days. And then Quinn, can you just, I know it's short, but the language that would be included so council understands it for council action at the end.
Sure, I just added a sentence to the purchase and sale agreement, if the council chooses to move forward. That closing shall not occur without the approval of the city council.
So can I throw something out that might be probably just creating more drama or more conversation, but if we kept that at 90 days, if we went back to Jim and asked him to complete his study without a purchase and sale agreement within 90 days, do you think that's feasible?
Yes, I mean, he's already offered to complete it in 90 days, so I don't know why he couldn't do that with or without a purchase and sale agreement. Yes.
I would be comfortable with that.
We also, remember you guys, we're talking about $40,000 per acre for prime property, even if it ever is built on, that this also is potentially investment property for the city. I mean, I don't, you know, we're not in the business to do that, but I'm looking 40 years, you know, who knows what happens down the road, but when right now, just looking at the value of the property, when any lot you can buy that's got a view of the lake to build a house on starts at $100,000 around. We're just, we know the land is worth it. It's not a waste of money, even if it never is sold, and it's preserving that land as open space.
For the resident deer.
For the 10 deer.
Yeah.
I know. All right, anyway, it's
Different
difficult.
questions. Is there any way you could, that Jim's study could be done in less than 90 days?
No, I doubt it, but I could talk to him.
Okay.
Now,
Where I'm
because we wanna
going-
do all of the road ends, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
If this was isolated, yes, but to put them all together,
Where I'm going with this is that, I don't know that it's necessary that we have a purchase and sale agreement to complete the gathering of information that we need to make an informed decision on what our top properties are based on the goals that we've laid out. And it is very apparent that there is a lot of angst in the room regarding the commitment into this purchase and sale agreement, even though we could essentially get out because it's 72 degrees outside and it's not warm enough. We can get out for any reason whatsoever within 90, whatever our terms are. In order to create more of an environment where there's open conversation and there is the removal of the stress about us being committed to this piece of property so that we can have an open and productive conversation, because as soon as the tensions rise around this, the ability to have an effective conversation begins to be impeded. I would rather have a situation where we have a city council workshop where we have all of the information of all the properties. For those that are opposed to this piece of property, I would love to have one point person so that we don't have to hear the same thing over and over and over. Have one point person that is organizing the folks who are against this property, and can be at that same meeting, and there's no stress about or concern that the city's just gonna go ahead and purchase this piece of property because we already have this agreement out in the world. I would rather have a productive conversation where that element has been removed, if we can achieve that. I don't know that this piece of property is going to be purchased in 3 months' time. And Jim's already been down the road of evaluating this piece of property. If we can speed that process up and have the public conversation, have our workshop in a faster time frame than a slower time frame, I think that would be better.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll tell you what I do like about it, and that is that it's honest. You know, we're saying, we're gonna look at this, we're gonna add this in with these other properties that we're looking at. I think if we don't make some commitment to, potentially buying it, if we just keep dancing around and go, well, you know, maybe, it'll get sold, because we're interested in it, we're looking at it, we're interested in it. Perhaps I'm too direct, but if we do a purchase and sale, then we're gonna have those discussions on price, on whether or not we can get those access roads. We're gonna be serious. If we're just kind of playing around with it, I think we've decided then tonight we're not gonna buy it.
But if we're gonna really pursue this one, then why not address John and his recommendation, you know?
It's interesting, isn't it?
To buy the fingers.
Right. I mean, if we're really looking at all the access points, so.
Yeah, if this doesn't happen tonight, we're
What kind
not
of
gonna buy
words?
it. I agree with that, Wendy. We wouldn't, we're losing our interest. It's gonna be gone. It's gonna get sold to somebody else. Then why spend the money on Brennan looking at developing it? I feel like we're wasting money if we're not serious about it. And even if we are serious about it and decide we're more serious in 6 months, somebody else will have come all along as the price drops and Guy gets this property sold, and the city's or land trust or whoever loses the opportunity to save it from developers.
Mention on the document that you were adding to make sure the council's inserted in the process, closing is probably not what I wanna hear as the end line. I wanna hear at the end of the due diligence period.
Okay.
Closing could be sometime subsequent to that. So in other words, at the end of that 120 days.
Council, I assume there's more public, comment, is there? Would you like to speak?
Is Jay Brennan,
Jay, no, he's not.
who instructed him to draw up the map the way this is without parking?
You wanna come to the microphone and address?
That's a good question.
But the whole crowd can't hear you.
If anybody else has further comment, please come.
Doug Mallett, M-O-U-A-T. I'm a student of architecture, or I was many years ago. And I look at all the work that's been done on this map over here, and I can appreciate all that work that's gone into it. But who instructed him not to look at parking? I drove by Lakeside this summer, and I could hardly get down the road. There were so many cars. They have not done their job in figuring out where to park all these cars. People aren't gonna walk down to that. They're gonna drive down to it. I've been working at Shores condominiums out there for quite a while, and I see all the cars that come through. I see the people that walk down from the houses up above. And believe me, the people that walk down are nowhere near as many cars driving down through there. We are a car society. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. What are we gonna do about it? It just doesn't make sense to me. That's it.
Thank you.
This is Donald, we're trying to figure it out. Isn't that something that we're trying to figure it out with this study? What is it that this property is good for?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
part of the consideration.
And part of it, the thought too, is being able to tie into the trail to actually make this one more of a user, walker friendly, pedestrian friendly.
We're giving instructions to do that, not consider parking.
No, parking is part of what he's.
Parking is part of it.
Parking is part of his study.
Right, we're moving on.
So
Next
just
up.
a couple practical responses to your questions, Aaron. So purchase and sale doesn't really cost the city anything. You do have the right to get out of it and get the earnest money back. It does give the seller some sense, towards Wendy's point, of, you know, this is real. Options typically come with some payment that's non-refundable. Either route could be pursued, but you're gonna wanna figure out what the price is. And you don't get to the price until you get into the negotiation. So that's just kind of basic, sort of real estate stuff there. The other thing, there is motivation to sell. So we'll probably entertain another price drop in the near term, should the city not be interested in moving ahead. Again, I'm not so sure, where the 400,000 will fall with the owners, but this is the remnant of their grandfather's farm, and so the intention was always to offer something to the valley in honor of those pioneers, not just them, but all of the pioneers who really gave so much to get us all here today. So, yeah.
I think it's fair to be said that when we first started talking about it, there was a price for the public, and then there would be a price as your mom and her sister wanted to do something good for the city, so.
Yeah. I
think I just said what you said.
I'm John Higgins. I'm a realtor also, and there's a lot of stuff I agree with that Guy has said, but Guy, could you go to your mom and your aunt and actually ask them for something like a first right of refusal, something of that sort, so it's not an option? They can continue to market the property. It's actually on the market right now instead of paying for an auction or something like that. Now, we talk about locking in a price. you know, cause that's what we wanna do, we wanna lock in a price with a set number, whether it's 400, 600, $1 million, something like that, cause whatever cost that's gonna be. You know, that's fine and dandy for the city of Chelan to lock in that price, but would they entertain a first right of refusal, something like that? Something that, would allow the city to do their due diligence, continue to do the stuff that they need to do to look into developing this, or putting a trail on it, or doing nothing. And even if the city of Chelan does nothing on the property, still liable for the lookout coming down and partying, those guys trashing the place, you still gotta pick up and maintain that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's something to talk to your aunt, your mom about, maybe, you know, like if you do lock into a lower price, it doesn't necessarily have to be on paper to be a lower price, because they're gonna get, tax benefits from donations, and whatever amount they donate to the city of Chelan.
Thank you, John. Skip?
I'll be brief on this, Mr. Mayor. I thought about presenting this earlier, but when John Olson brought up the idea of the fingers, my grandmother, God bless her late soul, sold the Fingers property to the Goodfellows. There's a deed, this is the deed right here for that property. That was signed in 1962. It's hard to find it. If you go in and put Goodfellow and Morse into the auditor's website, it doesn't pull this deed up. You've got to actually work backwards through the number. I don't know why that is, except the clause at the end which says, and reserving easement for waterway over vacated Boulevard Avenue between the westerly line of Pine Street extended in the center of War Street, and yada yada. My late grandmother didn't give the Goodfellows all of the property. She reserved the right to a waterway. Now, that's different than the Boulevard Avenue that was reserved by Lakeside, the town of Lakeside, when they vacated. They left public access. They were broad on that. And Judge Allen has ruled that that's a walking easement, but I don't think this deed has ever been ruled upon. And so I think there's a lot of leverage. And I've given a copy of this to Mr. Jackson, but I'm gonna go over and give this to Quentin Bacher because he's a lawyer and he can look at it and he can decide whether or not that case that went up to the Supreme Court, whether or not this might have been a mandatory counterclaim, or whether or not this might have been something that should have been involved in the ruling that Judge Allen had. But if it isn't either of those, the Goodfellows don't have the right to have a fill there. There is a right reserved in the deed that they bought the property with to a waterway. Now, on July 31st, the Goodfellows transferred the property into a new company they formed in early July called Tripen Inc. And the people in that are on the auditor's website. I'm gonna give all that to Quentin, and he should bring that to the council and give you an opinion about whether or not this deed gives you an ability to go in your negotiations with the Goodfellows or in a condemnation process.
Can I just quickly ask, we're 2 hours into the meeting, and the topic tonight is the Spader Bay piece of property. Just, we've got lots more people to talk.
I thought the actually issue was lake access, but yeah, you're right.
I just have a couple of questions, clarification. In the proposed draft, real estate draft, who came up with the $400,000? Where, is that a pie? Somebody just said, hey, let's offer the O'Neills.
Yes.
So, who thought of that figure?
I did.
Okay, so they haven't seen it, they have no idea.
That's correct.
My other question is, we're talking about this piece of property, and there's no access trails. It seems to me, I could be totally wrong, maybe I don't read maps very well, but if there's no egress and ingress to this property, how are the O'Neills gonna sell it? They have landlocked themselves with Lookout on one side and Vindalock on the other, and a private road that Spader Bay owns. How are they going to access? Who is gonna build 15 homes on land that has no road? I don't know. I need that explained to me.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? I like the words real quick.
My name is Chris Grazio, when I see the map, I see, these little trails coming in and out. And so maybe is there a way to, is there a compromise in terms of, possibly like a public purpose segregation where we use part of that and part of it stays developed, where maybe we can, there's a compromise for, the family and the city, something in between. So it's just, something that I just saw and I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else? Council? All right, I'm gonna make a comment before the vote happens. This is being on council is a kind of sometimes a thankless job, and they have tough votes, and we look back on some of the votes and wish we did it differently. I will say that I do want to give the council cover on this because we've talked about it 5 other times, and I don't see any consensus. There's nothing from the mayor or the city administrator telling the council one way or the other. But I do think that there are people in the community that do like open space. I think that they like the idea. All I've ever heard is how terrible the lookout is as they drive out the highway. We hear those things over and over and over at this council, and then this comes before us, and I think the largest segment here is really the neighborhood, which is great, but it is not the whole entire community. So I want to make sure that as we move forward, that we don't turn a blind eye to a public access or something that might be good, keeping that thing clean of building. I'm surprised to see the raising of hands, because none of those people I've ever heard from as far as they want to see more homes built in this community. So I just want to make sure that before the vote is taken, they are going to do what they feel is the right thing to do, not necessarily for one particular group. I don't think by voting is saying they did not hear. I think we heard it really clear, and on the next follow-up public meeting, if there is one, we'll get a much larger room, we'll have a bathroom break, and we'll have a good dialogue and let everybody speak or let all the community speak. So with that, there is a motion on the table.
Is there been a motion?
Nobody's made it.
But
I know, but there is a
proposed potential. Can I ask you a question, Mayor, real quick, of either Quentin or Craig or Guy?
Go ahead.
To address the question that one of the sisters just had, I'm sorry, I forgot what your last name was, but it's illegal to have landlocked land.
They did it themselves.
I know, but what I'm saying is if somebody wants to take that on at some point, and maybe Stan could speak to this or another lawyer, eventually you can't have land that is inaccessible. That if somebody wants to put something in there, whether they buy an easement or negotiate an easement or sue for an easement, they will get an easement to land. You cannot have a landlocked piece of property. It's just not legal.
Since I heard my name, if you voluntarily landlock your land, that is the exception, and the Supreme Court has ruled. If you voluntarily landlock your land, you do not have a right to a prescriptive easement or access easement.
The property has an easement.
Say it again.
Property has an easement.
Okay.
Could we know where the easement is?
Yeah, it comes up Spader Bay.
Okay. So there is an easement.
Is it possible to, before moving forward with this potential motion, to have the conversation about the first right of refusal? See if that might be something that the family is interested in?
That's not gonna get you the price.
Yeah, it isn't. How's that any different? We have complete control with it out for any reason. But
no, we have to.
Okay, so I move to authorize the mayor to finalize and execute the purchase and sale agreement between Terry O'Neill, Linda O'Neill Parlett, and the city of Chelan.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I do have one. I'd like to address Mr. Thompson's question. Maybe this for Mike. As far as the cost, I think that we're talking about a $400,000 purchase price. And we were talking there about, do you want to weigh in a little bit? Steve took us through the financing part of it, so I don't know how accurate, I'm not saying you're wrong, But I just wanna make sure the council knows going into this vote.
We're discussing a $400,000 purchase price. We asked the finance director to put together $1 million because if there is some development. So that number is not directly linked to what we anticipate the cost will be.
Okay.
And certainly we didn't want to start at 400. We want to try and give a truer picture. We're not intending to build roads necessarily, so I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I guess I won't rule it out because we haven't finished the study yet. And so we're focused on the acquisition right now, and Mr. Brennan is working on a trail proposal, and if you remember his proposal that council approved, if we would like him to do bid estimates on any aspect of the work, then we will pay him for that, and it's a pretty reasonable fee. So that would be an adjustment to his scope of work if we reach a point that he would actually do an estimate on the construction of the trail.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay?
Nay.
So we have 4-2. Motion passes. So there's the 2 nays and 4 yeas. Do you have that, Perry?
I do,
Thank you.
This will allow us to put up this property and the other properties at the side. We'll be able to have real facts to make real decisions. That's what we do.
If we want to take a short recess, unless you want to stay around, you're free to head out.
What's coming up?
Meeting's not over. 40 minutes. Well, it's good seeing you, Gary.
All right, man. Take care.